Headline, South Vietnam surrenders and the communists occupy Saigon. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger says he will ask Congress for funds to care for as many as 70,000 Vietnamese refugees.
Saigon ơi, vẫn có con vương trên đường. Đường ngày xưa mưa có ướt ngập lối người về, rồi mùa thu lá còn đổ xuống công viên.
I know I was getting out of bed and getting dressed, and the news broadcast said that Governor Jerry Brown of California was opposed to having any Vietnamese refugees settling in California. And in fact, one of his aides tried to keep the first airplane from landing. Here were people who were being driven from their home country, had no place to go, and we were trying to reject them. That didn't make sense. So that's when Ralph, I had him come in, and we sent him to Camp Pendleton.
And he said to me, he said, if you see that goddamn Jerry Brown, he said, remind him what it says on the bottom of the Statue of Liberty. And I never forgot that. So I took a flight down to San Diego, and I drove up to the base at Camp Pendleton, and I saw this just huge encampment of tents. People were just arriving in droves. These people were totally bewildered. The shirts on their back, what they had.
I was 10 years old. Of course, I remember a lot about Vietnam. We were middle class. My dad worked for the United States Embassy, so our lifestyle was very nice and comfortable. But everything quickly changed.
Bác đã làm cho nhiều cái cơ sở của chính phủ Hoa Kỳ. Thì ở hàng xóm đó, người ta biết. Và bác nghĩ rằng bác không đi đó, thì không thể nào yên thân.
I heard from one of the refugees that Saigon fell in the hand of the communists on the 30th, and everyone just cried.
Đương nhiên nó một cái thay đổi lớn đó. Thì chắc chắn là vừa lo mà mình cũng biết rằng không biết khi nào mình trả lại thì mình đi.
And then when we got to Camp Pendleton, there were just hundreds and hundreds of tents that were put up. And I thought, okay, we're going to stay in these tents for how long? And will we ever leave this place?
And I talked to the commanding officer, and I said, you know, the President of the United States has written a letter to our governor, and I worked for the governor, and I gave him my card. And I said, we're interested in learning more about resettlement of some of these folks. And he looked at me like I was the best thing he'd seen for a long time. He just couldn't believe it. When the word went out, you know, that in the camp, people lined up, they wanted to go someplace. They didn't want to sit in those camps.
Thì cho nên đi danh liền. Thật ra nhiều người họ cũng nghe nói miền Bắc họ sợ lạnh đó. Nhưng mà điều mình ở xứ nóng đó, qua đây thì nghe nói lạnh nó sợ, nhưng mà đều có những người như bác thì cảm thấy là mình chấp nhận. Ít nhất là mình tìm một cái đời sống coi sao cũng được, mình cũng phải ráng mà đi lên chứ không thể nào đứng lên được.
I guess I will never forget the greeting the first busload. We set up a reception center at Camp Murray. You know, it was important, I thought, because it was a first, and I was both determined to make sure that we were hospitable and that we did welcome them and do it right. And so that's why we were very insistent on sponsoring families with each of the Vietnamese families, so that we just didn't turn them loose someplace in Washington and said, well, you're on your own.
People from all walks of life stepped forward to help in teaching people how to shop and what American traditions were. And so places like Olympia, Walla Walla, Oroville, Twisp, they settled everywhere. Like any refugee group, the first generation took the lousiest jobs. I mean, they were awful jobs.
Không ngày nghỉ, 7 ngày một tuần mà làm liên tục, bởi vì làm theo ship. Cái nhà máy nó chạy nghĩa là 24 tiếng, thành ra chia 3 nhóm. Thì mình không có thâm niên, mình làm cái ca tối. Thì 6 giờ chiều cho tới 6 giờ sáng. Không có ngày nào nghỉ hết.
Being almost 10 years old, I was thrust into the role of like a second mom to my sister and brothers, because my dad has to go to work, so every time he left the house, I was very apprehensive when someone knocked on the door or call a home, because I didn't know any English, so I quickly had to learn English on my own.
4 months after this greeting, my personal assistant came in and said, Governor, you won't believe this. And she said, one of the families that you greeted had 5 children, and she was pregnant with the 6th. And the baby was just born, and they named him Evans.
Tên là Evans thì để cũng như là cho gia đình cũng như họ hàng bạn bè biết rằng mình có một cái vấn đề mà ghi ấn trong lòng. Một thống đốc cũng như là nghĩ ngợi về cũng như cái thân phận người tị nạn đó, rất cần cái sự giúp đỡ. Mình thấy một người trước mắt mình biết là một ân nhân.
We were pen pals first, right? And there was a lot of exchanges and happy birthdays. But then I didn't physically meet him until in elementary school.
When he met Evans, he kneeled down to his level and wrapped his arm around him and talked to him, and that's just so humbling for me to see. That he was so kind and take his time out to meet this boy in a little city of Renton.
I visited him in his first grade class, and we have followed that family ever since. And we get together at Christmas time every year, and it's a bigger and bigger get-together because now those 6 children are married, they have children, the next generation is on, and they are doing superbly well. All 6 graduated from the University of Washington. 1 with a master's degree from MIT, 2 with dental degrees. Education was the one power that they had, the ability to grow and to be something in this brand new community.
Ngoài cái sự mang ơn của thống đốc và những người dân ở đây đó, thì bác thấy mình có bổn phận phải sống sao cho nó xứng đáng.
Through these 40 years, you see things as an adult and you have an appreciation for it. It just strikes me that, he thought about what's right first. He did that, and then he figured out how to do it. He led with character and he led with, principles, and I've always tried to be that way.
As I became, a young woman in my 20s, I felt I should not disappoint America, who took us on as a big burden. I didn't want to become the kind of citizen that would make them feel ashamed that they accepted us to this country.
And they weren't the only one. They were typical, I think, of many of the families who came. Just we got to know them better. But to come was so little, and to end up creating so much, it makes you realize that the country is a lot stronger with refugees, because these are the people with initiative and with get up and go, and they're going to be great citizens and they make the United States stronger.
Dù thời gian có là một